Hello, hello. I am Sinner, and I am back with another book review. This time I am reviewing a book by Aristotle, which is the Metaphysics. The Metaphysics by Aristotle. I actually started this book by trying to live stream myself reading it, and that didn't go well because it was just too long and uh, too difficult, basically. And every single one got demonetized, even though I have like 2 viewers. But whatever. Um, Overall, it was actually kind of underwhelming. Um, it can really be broken up into 4 parts, the book. The first part is like a bunch of groundwork. Like the first third of the book is just nothing but philosophic groundwork, establishing premises, defining things, that sort of stuff. It's not at all interesting or exciting. And then the next part of it is all about substance and the problem of the one and the many. How can something be one and be many at the same time? You know, um, how can I be a human and individual, me, something unique, but at the same time human refer to a bunch of different things? You know, that's a bit strange. Um, and he goes on to talk about his theory of substance. And then, and this was the part I found more interesting, he then goes on and gives a argument for God's existence. He makes an unmoved mover argument for God's existence, which was very strange coming from a Greek polytheist. And he flirts with the idea in the book of there being, after that, like 55 or 47 unmoved movers instead of there being one. And then he goes, "Ah, you know what, there's actually just one." And I think the reason he does that is because he's trying to, in the book, basically give an explanation as to the how do I put it? The the reason why Greek society is polytheistic. I think that's what he's trying to do. And the next thing, and the final thing he really talks about, is he gives an argument against the theory of forms. And that's the part, I mean, it's at the end of the book, so maybe that's why, but that's the part that's stuck with me the most out of everything. I think it's actually a pretty good argument. And then it also explains the argument for immanence, right? So the universal being immanent in the thing in question rather than outside of material reality. And I never actually really considered the problem with this. But with the theory of forms, if you have abstract things like numbers and, abstract characteristics, let's say, abstract ideas exist completely separate from material reality, so the idea that even if material reality doesn't exist, numbers will still exist in the abstract sense. I didn't realize, but the theory of forms has this problem where if that is the case, then you have an infinite regress. So, there's one human right here making this video, and if there was, if Platonism, if we presuppose Platonism for a moment, then there would be me, there would be the abstract version of me, and then there would be the abstract idea of me, right? So, and then obviously there would be the idea of me, and then the idea of me, and so on and so on and so on ad infinitum. And that causes a really serious philosophic problem because the whole point of trying to solve the problem of universals in particulars is that you're trying to explain how it's possible to know that something's a human while also knowing that it's a particular human and not the same as every other human. Um, so it's a real problem, and I didn't think about it until recently, until I read it. But this is actually a problem for orthobros and the orthodox when you think about it. Because as far as I can tell, the orthodox argument for divine conceptualism as like one of the basic bases, a basis of metaphysics, a basic concept in Eastern Orthodox metaphysics. The problem is it's kind of the same as the theory of forms. It's just instead of it being the theory of forms, and then you know the abstract ideas exist in an abstract alternate world of forms, alternate universe. Instead, they exist in the mind of God. Now, the problem is the perfect mind of God instead of the perfect alternate universe of forms. It's a transplanting of the problem, but it's not a solving of the problem. As far as I can tell, all the problems with the theory of forms exist in divine conceptualism. So that's something to think about, you know. That's a question worth looking into. And maybe I will sometime look into, is that actually as big of a deal as I think it is? But yeah, we'll see. What else is there to say about this book? I think one thing that's interesting, and I really like about Aristotle, especially after reading the book, is he actually makes a good few presuppositional arguments. And I, throughout my whole life, have had a natural tendency to presuppositional arguments. I really like presupposing, a particular position and then taking it to its logical conclusion, and then using that as like an argument rather than, you know, trying to use my own position. I prefer reductio ad absurdum to normal argumentation, is what I'm trying to say. Though it has caused me pain in my life. The amount of times people have just responded to what I would see as a completely logical argument, and they'd go, "Oh, that's just different. Oh, that's different. Oh, well, that's different. Well, those are two different things." It's the amount of times I've heard that, and they don't understand the logic of why I'm saying what I'm saying is something that's frustrated me when I was a kid. Anyway, that's unrelated, but yeah, he makes a couple presuppositional arguments which I thought were fun, including making an argument against the world being in constant flux and things being ever changing. And the problem is, obviously, if there's no permanency, if identity is never, ever, ever permanent in any sense, then you can't actually say anything is anything. That's the fundamental flaw. So, yeah, it might be a book now, but, if identity, if the universe itself, and I don't know how to put it, it's not just like the perception of reality that's changing. It's like assuming that the changing perception of reality, or reality itself, is like it's kind of hard to explain, but the fundamental problem is you can't actually identify anything as anything, because if everything's changing and nothing has any identity, then nothing is anything, because it will change, or it has changed, or it's constantly changing. So he makes a funny presuppositional argument about this, where he's like, well, why do you eat bread? If everything's in constant flux and everything's changing, then bread isn't even bread, right? It's because in one moment it'll be bread, but in the next it won't. It's and if the identity of things is constantly in flux like this, it may as well, anything could be bread at any point. So why would you eat bread in particular? It could be poison. It could be not nutritious. maybe bricks will actually be the nutritious thing in the next 15 minutes. Um, but of course, people eat. So by eating, you're making a counter argument to your own claim, right? And that's something that's also true, which I actually really like. And he points out is that, just one of the things that really frustrates me is people will make claims, but if you're not actually living by that claim, then it's not actually a claim you believe in. It's a, it's just a thing. But I'll read out what he said here because I thought it was so funny. What about when a medic orders this particular food to be served to the patients? Why do the patients accept it? Why, we might ask, is it any more the case that this food is, say, bread, than it is not? So it would not make any difference whether they ate it or not. In practice, of course, the patients do indeed accept the prescribed food, and in doing so betray their belief that they have the truth on the issue and that it is, as a matter of fact, the prescribed food. But this would be a ludicrous procedure if there really were no permanency in the nature of perceptibles, and all nature were at all times the playthings of process and flux. And he also makes a point where it's like, it's silly also to argue that like perception is reality, because that's just like obviously not the case. But if that was the case, you would have to, if you like, you know, like pushed your eye the right way, then you would see double, and you would have to actually argue that while pushing your eyes in and seeing double, that reality has duplicated. And it's like, that's obviously, I mean, if someone has the gusto to, present that argument and commit themselves to it, then good on them, honestly. But yeah, I thought it was quite interesting. I will say, as a last thing, I still don't really get a lot of what he was saying, especially around the whole idea of substance and thisness as opposed to, you know, regular identity and what makes a thing a thing. It's still kind of lost on me, but I think I'm getting closer. I think I'm getting closer. Anyway, that's all. I am Sinner. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.